Russians are seriously considering giving up the rest of Kherson region in favor of doubling down its presence in the east, where they allegedly have more chances to succeed. At the same time, the advancement of Russians in the brand new front line in Zaporozhye region has come to a full stop only after a couple of days. And finally, more and more representatives of the Russian government started accepting the possible defeat. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And first of all, we have this picture of the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, with the military equipment. And according to the Ukrainian armed forces, they have no longer shortages with the winter clothes, as well as helmets and bulletproof vests. Which, to be honest, is a very good thing, because it solves at least one problem for Ukrainians for these upcoming winter battles. Then we have this picture from Lviv, where Ukrainian surgeons were able to do an open heart surgery in pretty much complete darkness. And even though it might feel like it's not directly related to this war, but if you think about this is just yet another proof about the resistance, will and creativity of Ukrainian people. Our next stop brings us to the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, where we can see that this city went through another night in complete darkness. And according to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, approximately 50% of Ukraine's energy infrastructure is either critically damaged or completely destroyed, which is an increase from 40%, which has been previously reported by President Zelensky. And then here's another picture from Kyiv, which shows us the remaining parts of an intercepted X-55 Russian missile. What makes this specific missile so special is that Russia usually uses them to carry nuclear warheads. But this time, the nuclear part has been replaced with the fake one. And this whole thing basically allows us to assume is that Russia is getting critically low on its missile supplies. And because of this, they are forced to use other, way more valuable rockets, such as this one, X-55. But unfortunately, we do have some bad news, because according to several reports, Russia is stockpiling the microchips for its more regular caliber missiles. And so, unfortunately, it's just a matter of time until they can produce more. And in the meantime, while waiting, they're reportedly receiving missiles from Iran and North Korea to cover their shortages. And then here's one more video from Kyiv, where we can see the locals launching the fireworks. At first, it might seem like not a big deal, I mean, like, come on, so what about this? But then you start realizing how such regular things can become horrifying under different circumstances. I mean, for these people who launch these fireworks, this is just an entertainment for them. But can you imagine other people who are just sitting at their homes and then suddenly they hear these loud explosions outside their windows? What is the very first thing they're gonna think about? And this is scary. Very soon we'll be talking about Russians, who most likely think to give up the rest of Kherson region in favor of the east, and most likely, in case this is true, this will happen very soon. And if you don't want to miss any updates on this rapidly developing situation, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, because the weekend is coming and I'll try to post something. Alright, and before we talk about the south, allow me to give you a very quick update from the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians continued to push Russians next to Svatove-Kreminna road, while the main focus of Russians remained pretty much the same, which is next to Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Donetsk city. And then on this map we can see the most significant fighting in the last 24 hours. And as you can see, there is no denying the fact that the combat activities in the the east increased significantly. And then right here we can see the changes in territorial control over the last 24 hours. And as you can see, Russians were able to capture a little bit more of Opytne, while in the meantime Ukrainians started approaching them from the west and liberated a little bit of Vodiane. We also have some other reports which talk about the increase in combat activity next to another Opytne, and this one is to the south of Bakhmut. But so far there have not been any territorial control changes. And then right here is the picture from Ilovaisk, which shows us the destroyed railroad tracks. And based on how deep this settlement is located inside occupied Donetsk region, I think it is pretty confident to say that this was the work of Ukrainian partisans. And finally, we have some more reports claiming that Ukrainians attempted to recapture Pavlivka. But unlike Russians, who used a lot of brand new and inexperienced recruits, Ukrainians were mainly using artillery strikes. Alright, and now let's talk about the situation in the south. And while I'm going there, let's really quick stop in Zaporozhye region. Because today we have some new statements by the International Atomic Energy Agency regarding the situation in Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And long story short, the agency was not able to find any evidence about this dirty bomb by Ukrainians. They also asked Russians to drop all the claims about the ownership over the station and return the control over Zaporozhye nuclear power plant back to Ukrainians. And another news from Zaporozhye region is that this third front line, which Russia tried to open just a couple of days ago, already came to a complete stop. Yesterday, approximately 600 to 700 Russians tried to capture Huliay Pole, but they were easily repelled by Ukrainian forces. After this, the remaining Russians came back to their positions, and since then there was not a single attempt to advance anywhere else. And to give a little bit credit to the Russian army, most likely the reason they did it is to test the defenses of Ukrainians. And for those of you who are new on this channel or who has missed my previous video, here is your extremely quick summary about this Zaporozhye new front line. Long story short, the alleged tactic of Russians was to advance next to Pavlograd and to Vasilkovo. And they were supposed to do it with the new empowered forces, which was supposed to come from the south and relocate to Zaporozhye region and to Donetsk region. And we will talk about this relocation in more details very soon. After this, Russians with the existing front line in the east and supposedly recently added front line in Zaporozhye region were supposed to add another front line from the north of Ukraine, with the end goal being the encirclement of Donetsk region and subsequent, how they call it, liberation of the rest of it. And I mean, taking into consideration the most recent military success of Russians, I can only wish them good luck in this new ambitious plan. But okay, and now as promised, let's talk about the situation in the south. And first of all, right here we can see another abandoned Russian tank which became a present for Ukrainians. And then in this video from Chernobyevka airport we can see whatever is left from Russian raider Podlyot K1. And most likely, judging by the size of this crater, this vehicle has been a target of a Ukrainian HIMARS. And then right here we can see the current condition of Kherson International Airport. And unfortunately, there is nothing much left. Not the building, not the planes. I also have way more new photos and videos of combat actions and first-person footage, and according to the YouTube guidelines, I'm not allowed to use it in my video. For this reason, I uploaded some of it to my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to see this footage, the links will be down below. Alright, and now let's get back to the south. According to several reports, a lot of combat activities have been heard in Oleshki and Hola Pristan. And as you can see, these settlements are located right next to Dnipro river, which basically means that Ukrainians are testing the defenses of Russians and preparing to cross the river. At the same time, Ukrainians reportedly targeted and most likely even destroyed the Russian military headquarters in Novokakhovka and the Russian military warehouse in Chaplinka. The significance of the latter place is that this is exactly where Russians were relocating their forces, military equipment and military vehicles. And as you can see, this whole area is under Ukrainian fire control thanks to HIMARS. Then, according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians in the western part of Kherson are extremely vulnerable for Ukrainian interdiction campaign. This basically means that the positions of Russians, along with their warehouses, headquarters and pretty much the entire logistics, is easily accessible by Ukrainians. And like I was mentioning in my previous videos, such logistics includes the roads which lead to Armyansk, road from Novokakhovka, road from Khenechensk, and road which goes all the way to Mariupol through Melitopol. And yes, as soon as Russians lose the control over the rest of Kherson region, this will mean that the Crimean Peninsula will be isolated. As for now, Ukrainians are preparing to cross Dnipro river, and they do it by testing the defenses of Russians on the other side of the river, as well as sending some individual partisan groups. And whenever this breach happens, most likely Ukrainians will enter the southern Kherson from Kinburn-Spit, Oleshki and maybe from Novokakhovka. Russians do realize this, that is why earlier this week the majority of their forces moved approximately 10 to 15 kilometers away from the front lines. And some of them started retreating even deeper into Kherson region. But let me tell you what, even this might not be enough. And Russians realize this as well. Because, I mean, how long can you retreat until eventually Ukrainians catch up with you? And I mean, you most certainly cannot win a war if you're constantly retreating, right? And at the same time, we all understand that most likely Russia does not have the power to retake Kherson back. And that is why it is very well possible that Russians might do a full withdrawal and give up the rest of Kherson region in exchange for strengthening its positions, mainly in the east, a little bit in Zaporozhye and a little bit in the north. Because, I mean, you remember just several minutes ago I was talking about this front line in Zaporozhye and that Russians, they need these reinforcements in case they want to try to be successful. And at the same time we have the eastern front line, where the situation is basically at stalemate for the last several months and the morale of Russian soldiers is depleting extremely fast. And as you can see, right now the full withdrawal of Russians from Kherson starts to make sense. Just think about this. Why would they need to keep this region, where they basically have zero chances, when they can use their remaining soldiers to strengthen their positions, where the chances are at least 0.5%? I'm honestly expecting a rapidly developing situation in the south in the nearest future, and if you don't want to miss these updates, just please subscribe to my channel. It only takes one click. And because of this, more and more Russian highest government authorities started realizing that practically Russia lost the war. They first started to accept the defeat last week, during the initial withdrawal from Kherson. Russian government representatives started to look for answers, but their superiors engaged this total media blackout mode. So the only information available was either from the Western sources or from Ukraine. And I mean, just think about this. If people have something to hide, they will try to speak as little as possible. But in this case, the Russian leadership was not talking at all. The previous narrative was that Russia will be able to beat Ukraine as soon as the West stops support Ukraine. But this support never stopped coming. Then this narrative changed and it became that we should wait until the people of Ukraine stop support Zelensky and he loses his power and influence. But guess what? The support for Zelensky and the genuine patriotism of Ukrainians is right now at all-time high. And finally, the narrative became that Russia just needs more soldiers, so let's do this partial mobilization and we will most certainly start doing better. And so far, the only achievement of Russia Russian army since this partial mobilization is that they were able to partially capture Pavlivka while losing the entire north of Kherson region. And then this disbelief started reaching the minds of regular Russians as well. Those Russians who were cheering the annexation of Ukrainian territories, as soon as this withdrawal from Kherson happened, they started asking the questions. Was Kherson ever a part of Russia historically, like our government told us? And this idea made them cope with the loss of Kherson much easier, all the way until the point when they simply didn't care. And so right now, the very same thing is happening with the war in general. Russian people started realizing that their government has always been telling them that this war is ours, but the only ones bearing the true consequences are the people themselves. And once again, the total recent silence of the Russian government only confirms the suspicions of regular citizens that something is wrong. And if you want to support my work, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you'll receive additional content. All the other useful links can be found to my right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you on Monday.